and understand. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop. Ever.
Greetings, folks. This is the Long in the Boot podcast, the podcast coming to you from the heel of the boot of Southwest Louisiana. I am your host, G Long. Sitting across the way is Deb.
Hello.
Hello, how have you been?
I have been well.
Outstanding. If you'd like to reach the Long in the Boot podcast, you can actually call. I've made that point. 337-502-9011. And the website, which I'm not really messing with right now because I think I'm going to let it go.
You just can't decide.
You
bought the name.
I don't know if I need it, but I'm definitely keeping the URL.
But I like the pictures of the dogs.
Yeah, I know. It's a conundrum. I just don't know if it's worth $18 a month to have two pictures of my dogs on the internet.
That's several gallons of gas.
And yes, as you heard at the outset of the show,
the heel of the boot
from the heel of the boot. The heel of the boot is covered in gross, stinky, sticky, nasty love bugs. It's love bug season.
It's a particularly virulent love bug season.
And those little tiny bastards dropping their sticky
and bastardettes.
Is
there
I don't know.
I don't know if there's we won't get into the gender discussion.
Well, it's pretty clear which gender is which when you look at them hooked butt to butt.
It's really
must be terrible to be the female. Well, which one is it? Is the female the big one or the little one? I don't know.
If we were going to have this discussion, you should have just looked up some information about it before we got all into it.
Screw them. I used a pressure washer today and still couldn't get some.
I would say that several hours of my week and your week have been dedicated to cleaning those little bastards off of our windshield, off of our
Did I just say
Jeep.
the F word? I think I did.
You may have. I just self-censored myself, which is unusual for me.
And ironic in that we'll be talking about free speech.
It's Free Speech Wednesday.
That's right. Free Speech Wednesday. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Free Speech Wednesday.
Don't do
I'm
that.
Your host, G Log.
No, people just
I'm going to bang something on the table. You tell me what it is. Here we go. Come on. First person to call and guess wins nothing.
And your drive time joke of the day. Okay.
No, my joke of the day was
Well, it's nice to be back in the seat.
It is. It's been a while. We had the interview with my son.
I took a time off.
Yes. A mental health day.
Yes, I did. Everybody needs that. We all need mental health days, apparently.
I suppose we do. Considering the times we live in.
Man. Oh. Yeah. I don't even know. I come up with topics every day because there's just so much to talk about.
It's ridiculous.
Okay.
That's what it is. But we've decided we've narrowed it down to free speech. A nice, simple topic.
Simple.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a clear-cut issue.
But tell us, Deb, why did this come up in particular this
wait
week?
a minute. You're calling me on that one. I didn't know I was ready. You told me you didn't want to do the history. You didn't want to go all the way back to Athens and Socrates.
Well, I didn't want to go too deep into the
so it's what I'm doing with my juniors right now. We've gone back to the curriculum has returned to American literature for 11th grade. It has for the last several years in my district not been American history.
What do the ancient Greeks have to do with modern American literature?
Thank you for that wrangling and reeling me back. So we're reading an article by some Harvard, Yale grad,
some big brain
PhD lady. Anyway, it's a good article. It's extremely long, and she says that the issue that we have is that the rhetorical devices of now I can't say it, Isagoria and Parrhesia. That's it, Isagoria and Parrhesia. Today we define those two terms as simply freedom of speech. But she says they're distinctly different and that all of our conflict today results from not understanding the two differences of freedom of speech.
That freedom of speech is more than just one thing.
Just one area.
You mean it's not binary?
I told you we weren't going to do the gender stuff. Just keep it out. I won't even talk about it. I'm just not even. Okay. So isagoria is basically your freedom of speech as a citizen and in the political realm.
Right.
That you can go into any government, public, institution, and you have freedom of speech to say what you need to say about your views on the political situation.
Provided they're
as a citizen, it's your duty, in fact, to do it
in the right.
You can go to
arena.
you can go to your school board meetings. You
can't just walk into like the office of the registrar of voters and just start railing against.
But your free
campaign.
speech is protected as long as it's not.
Well, if you prevent them from doing,
you're not
their
trying
business.
to incite violence.
But if you interrupt their ability to conduct,
you can't
the
disrupt. Just like
business.
students at school, you can protest, but it has to be.
You can't
peaceful.
interrupt the function of
Yes,
government.
and so you have to be careful of how you do that.
Yeah,
Anyway,
there you go.
and the other speech is the most troublesome one because paresia is freedom of speech in the I guess private sector.
Right.
You're not protected there, and you're going to be. Consequences are going to come from your peers, from society.
Right.
And
so
we see that, and that's been the most troublesome one. And you're not protected by the government in those realms.
No, and people go, First Amendment.
Well, and that was, so the article I made my students do before we got into the whole PhD, because I thought that was a little advanced for them. We jumped into colleges and what they're dealing and grappling with these days with students who, as professors say,
are too liberal.
Well,
that guy.
He says the students are coming to them without an understanding of their First Amendment rights and not recognizing that you can't shut people down. So colleges are having to really ta-ta their incoming students. They're having to
colleges are communist. God, that guy. Hey, buddy, shut up.
It's Free Speech Alley.
Free speech.
Free Speech Alley.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
yeah.
There you
Well,
go.
they still drag some people away, and they still had, in Athens.
How'd he get in our house anyway?
Free speech, was all the rage, and they still put Socrates to death for, free speech.
Yeah.
So you didn't really have it.
Well,
he thought he had it.
No, but here's the thing that's about this. The only reason that we even talk about Socrates anymore is his speech to young people caused them to question the religion of the day.
Well, exactly. So you have freedom of speech until you don't.
Right.
Until you've displeased the powers that be. Problem is, in America, powers that be change rapidly.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It can happen quickly.
But Socrates caused the young people in Athens to question the validity of the gods.
He wanted them to question everything.
But actually, he questioned everything.
So that wasn't outside of his comfort. He was going to question everything. He drank his damn hemlock. He took his poison.
Well, he didn't have to. He could have just left.
Yeah, he could have just left.
And he
you know
chose
what?
not to.
Romeo and Juliet could have just left too.
Well, the thing is, if Socrates had just left, we wouldn't remember him at all.
Yeah, none of this would have been the thing.
And so,
probably so.
Well done, Socrates.
So, freedom of speech.
Yeah, this has become a huge, huge topic, and I think everybody's kind of mixing and mushing all of the arguments up into one
and so
big
much
argument.
Opinion without those are social opinions. You've got the different, and then
we have to tangle with the fact that today everyone has the ability to express their opinion.
Yes, because
any
technology has created a bugaboo for. This issue.
And so you have this issue where at one time the people that disseminated information was the government. Yes. The government disseminated, and very quickly you had newspapers.
And newspapers, absolutely.
But the very first laws in this country trying to stifle speech came almost as soon as the country was founded.
Well, I have some about the colonists. I have.
You have it even before we had a government.
I have an Englishman who was, the Puritans. Do you want to do yours first, or you want me to do the little Puritan thing?
Well, you can go ahead and do the Puritans because they came first.
They did come first, and I think this is hysterical. And I think probably we should look up this Englishman, Thomas Morton.
And let's go ahead and agree that the Puritans, when it came to if government viewpoint is binary, meaning conservative, liberal, or Republican, Democrat. Not party.
One or the other.
Conservative or liberal.
Okay.
And we'll say classical liberal. because liberals today are not the
it's
same
a
as
difference.
classical liberals.
Absolutely.
If that is actually the way it's going to function in society, and it was already happening with the Puritans, because originally the Puritans, they figured everybody would just believe what they believed.
Sure.
It's religion.
Yeah, they weren't prepared for heretics
They weren't prepared for anybody to question anything about faith.
like those.
Like Socrates.
Exactly. The Quakers freaked them out. They punished them.
Yeah, and Quakers were pretty devout.
I know, and they were pretty righteous people.
Yeah.
Pretty balanced too in their views.
Right.
I mean, Quakers.
But they didn't toe the Anglican
They certainly
line.
did not. They didn't.
And Puritans
you don't
weren't
hold
Anglican.
slaves. Slaves are people too. They were very progressive in my mind. Puritans. So no, or Quakers.
Yeah.
Puritans did not.
Puritans
like
were still Anglicans, and that's
All right.
Catholic light, by the way.
that. So Thomas Morden. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know anything else about this guy. I may
Salt?
have.
He invented salt?
No, I don't think he did.
Oh, okay.
He was an Englishman. He came to Plymouth in about 1622, and he started immediately having, some difficulties
Some
with
issues.
the straight-laced pilgrims. He
those
was in a
people.
neighboring village. His village was called Marymount of other English miscreants and some Algonquin Indians. So basically, they had this little mixed rebel town near the.
Wait, they let Algonquin Indians
Live with them. Yes. He was called
Oh,
the
my
Plymouth
God.
Colony Governor, William Bradford at the time, dubbed him Lord Misrule.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah,
The Lord
so-
of Misrule.
The Lord of Misrule. And he had all these followers, and they would strap antlers to the top of
Yep.
an 80-foot maypole.
There you go.
And they have a festival, and there was dancing and drinking. And
Satan.
we know how the Puritans feel about dancing. They
Especially
didn't have
with,
a problem
with that
drinking.
creature with horns.
Just a little fun.
that couldn't have caused any problems. No.
No, not for them. So after he was banished, of course, from the colonies multiple times, he'd go back and forth between England, and he wrote a book in about 1633, his travels across the pond, and he critiqued the Pilgrims. He was kind of critical of them, and that is to be considered the first book ever banned in the United States. Or we weren't the United States, in
this
the
is
colonies.
yeah.
So New English Canaan, and it was published about 1633. He returned to the colonies 10 years later. His reputation, of course, was infamous by that time, and he was exiled again, sent to Maine because the mocking of the Puritans.
Yeah,
He
you
didn't
can't
like
mock.
that.
Mock.
Let's see. So even though he didn't enjoy them, he's infamous now because of it.
Well,
So anyway, we fast forward to today. So first book ever banned in the United States.
All right, well-
A critique of the Pilgrims.
We'll roll it forward to 1798.
There you go.
1798, we're a country. We've been a country for 9 years at that
Woo!
point. Woo, America! And we were going to war with our former allies, France.
Oh,
That quick.
my people.
Yeah, well, right after the war, we got friendly with Britain again.
Oh,
But
traitors.
America was split on this. A lot of Americans still hated the
what?
British.
America split?
Yeah.
No.
There were some that were still mad at the British for the whole, burning things and killing people thing. And
Pissed off.
anyway, so we were on the brink of war with France, and we had two parties. What? Party politics in America?
Already?
Do tell. Well, we have the Democratic Republicans, and we have the Federalists.
Don't confuse me, Democratic
And
Republicans.
it's easy to remember which one's which. The Federalists like the federal government.
Yes.
Democratic
Strong
Republicans.
federal rule.
Democratic Republicans led by Thomas Jefferson, in fact.
More middle of the road.
They were actually very much Republicans. They wanted a true
kind
republic.
of a conservative view.
Jefferson envisioned a nation of farmers, of gentlemen farmers, as he put it.
Gentlemen.
Gentlemen farmers.
What about the gentlewomen farmers?
Yeah, they don't count. And
Not for many years.
And of course, don't forget that everybody's entitled to their 3/5 of a person during this time.
Yes.
And so anyway, the Federalists controlled Congress. And on the eve of war with France, passed the Alien and Sedition Act. Now remember, we have the First Amendment that says the government shall not inhibit anyone's right to freedom of speech or press.
And I think that statement is really
it's pretty
definitive.
direct. Yes, it is. So the Federalist-controlled Congress passed 4 laws today known as the Alien and Sedition Acts. These laws raised the residency requirements for citizenship from 5 to 14 years. So already we're worried about foreigners.
New people with new ideas.
It also gave the president the sole authority to deport any aliens, arrest any alien, imprison any alien, and, of course, deportation during wartime.
Wow, those are really broad rights.
Okay. The Sedition Act also made it a crime for any American citizen to print, utter, or publish any false, scandalous, or malicious writing about the government or anyone in the government.
So, again, back to mocking. You can't do that.
Well, you can't even print something that, well, first of all, we'll get to this in a second, but the laws were all directed.
It can't be a lie.
The laws were all directed against the Democratic Republicans, the party that was overwhelmingly supported by new citizens. And the only people ever prosecuted under the act were editors of Democratic Republican newspapers.
Yeah, trying to stop them there.
Sedition Act trials, along with the Senate's use of its contempt powers to suppress dissent, set off a firestorm of criticism against the Federalist Party and contributed to their defeat in 1800, just 2 years later. People rose up.
Yeah.
After which the acts were repealed or allowed to expire. So within just a few years of actually becoming a country with a Bill of Rights that said the government can't do this thing,
the government did this thing.
Hey, we're the government. We're going to go ahead and do this thing that you said we can't do.
Well, to be fair, the Bill of Rights was about the people.
No,
So
the Bill of Rights is about the government. The Bill of Rights tells the government what it can't do.
Well, the Constitution.
There's nothing about the individual.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
I mean, just like,
I heard that argument the other day, though.
People still make that argument.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't think a whole lot about it.
It is best, as I've always taught my civics kids, Bill of Rights is the Bill of Don'ts.
Yeah.
The government will not, or the Bill of Will Nots. The government will not do this thing. The government will not do this thing. The government will not do this thing.
And then we'll qualify it now because we have this thing we want to do.
Well, that's the thing, like with gun rights. Mm-hmm. The government shall make no law.
So we're back to, it's just interpretation.
But it's not. It's very.
Yeah, I think it's definitive.
The Bill of Rights is basically a wall between the government and the people.
Yes. And
so the First Amendment especially has 5 rights in it. All of them tell the government that they can't restrict or promote a religion. They can't curtail anyone's right to free speech. They have to allow protest. And I'm paraphrasing that. Man, and
peaceful protest,
and but we agree that you can't print libelous statements or slander,
and
but then you have to prove that.
There are those.
There are limits.
Yes,
but again, the limits can be dealt with by simple acts, simple laws.
Well, Supreme Court decisions,
and the Supreme Court decisions certainly, but the fact is that. In 1798, the government clearly was just violating its own policy.
Sure.
Right off the bat.
They do it all the time.
Sure. And we still do it. There was a Espionage Act in 1917 in World War I that sounds just like the Alien and Sedition Act, except it dealt primarily with Germans, because you know how those Germans were.
Just change the names. That's it.
And if you criticized anybody in government during World War I, you could find yourself put in jail as well.
All righty.
Yeah.
So we have a history of this.
Well, yeah, especially the government likes to use these kind of laws to attempt to silence people who don't agree with their current policy, whatever it is.
Well, it's on a level of book banning or book burning.
Yeah. If you oppose the war effort and wrote that down.
Yeah.
Now, this is the crazy part. If you oppose the war effort and wrote that down in an opinion piece in a newspaper, you could be charged. So that was opinion. But at the same time, there is a violation there happening because you're writing it in a newspaper.
Yeah.
If it's an editorial,
and it's freedom of the press.
Yeah.
So it's a double.
And you could get hit with a 20-year prison term.
Wow.
And 2,000 cases were filed under the Espionage and Sedition Acts, and more than 1,000 ended in convictions with jail time.
Wow.
People went to jail for just simply saying we shouldn't be at war.
Let's not do this. Well, things changed. The media made things change.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know that the Vietnam War was officially, become a problem for the government when it started showing up on TV, when we started seeing it.
And the Supreme Court upheld the convictions for most of the individuals. And this is where we got the clear and present danger test, which is basically said, upholding the conviction, Justice Holmes said, the most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. So that's not protected. Now, I don't know if you can equate shouting fire in a crowded theater
to protesting
we shouldn't
a war.
Be at
we
war
shouldn't
in
be,
Europe.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
Not even a protest. It's just your opinion. I don't think we should be there.
Yeah.
And you say at home with your family. You should be allowed to say that.
Right. And the whole point was they weren't attempting to harm the United States.
No, but the United States was threatened because they felt like that might start other people going, he might be right.
Yeah.
Okay, so words have power?
Well, only the power we give them.
And the government's fearful that one person's opinion could be very powerful when other people take up that.
Well, we've seen it now. The pandemic sort of opened a Pandora's
I know.
box.
The technology thing has just, they didn't want that to happen.
Well, the Pandora's box of social media, where the government actually stepped in and tried to impose, basically tried to force the hand of private companies to censor
more.
And so now you have laws being passed. And in fact, in Texas, a Texas bill prohibits large social media platforms from censoring speech based on viewpoint. And that the Fifth Circuit Court has said that is a legal law, that you cannot allow these companies to determine what is and isn't allowed on these social media platforms. But here's the problem. There is a law called the Takings Act, or it's part of a law. It's the takings version. But basically the government can't take, and this is the problem, by telling these companies that they can't moderate their social media platform,
their own business,
that is the government effectively taking their property.
Yes.
They built the warehouses that house their servers. They put all this money in. All their bills.
They've created their foundation and structure of their business.
That's right.
And now an aspect of their business is being limited or controlled by the federal government.
Right. And so now it's going to go to the Supreme Court, because you also have the 11th Circuit that struck down an identical law in Florida. So now you have the Fifth Circuit saying yes,
and the other
and
the
11th Circuit saying no. And this is going to go to the Supreme Court.
It has to.
It absolutely
because
does.
Because it affects everybody that's ever made a comment or a post. I mean, look, your own post about a saltine turned into a small form of censorship, a comment about being a cracker, the word cracker, and it was covered. It was a veiled cover over his comment, and I was literally talking about, it might be offensive to some.
Yes, the word cracker.
Because you almost choked on a saltine.
Anyway, so this case is the takings clause bars government from taking private property without paying just compensation.
Okay, so if they gave each company then money,
what money?
Or no, tax breaks. Oh wait, they already get that. Right? I mean, I guess they don't pay the kind of taxes they should.
But the problem is that in effect this takes away their property and imposes a form of censorship on them, the censorship to not be able to censor their own property.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because you give up all those rights. When you sign on to Twitter,
when we click our terms
Facebook,
of agreement that we read, which we didn't,
We read some of it, but not enough to matter.
No. Oh.
But the takings clause applies to both cases.
Yeah.
And
that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I'm really curious how this will go.
How they're going to go. Well, as far as so in 2021, the American Library Association reported 1,600 individual books were being challenged or removed in libraries over that year.
In schools or libraries?
In libraries and schools.
Okay.
So that's a combination. It's the highest number since they began tracking 30 years ago.
Okay.
Which you would think Well, of course, I guess the books weren't being written 30 years ago.
Not these books.
Yeah, not these books. That's true. So just an increase at an unprecedented rate. Daily they're getting challenges, receiving multiple challenge reports daily, when they used to get maybe one or two a week.
Well, and okay, so
almost all conservative parents.
Oh,
objecting
absolutely.
To,
But I've looked at a few of these books. The one that really stands out was the book. It's called "This Book Is Gay."
Yeah, I saw
And
that.
I looked through it, and it's marketed to 11 to 13-year-olds. If my 11-year-old child got this book and I was unaware of it,
Yeah.
I would be upset.
So if you've been made aware of it,
Because there are things in the book, and the one that really stood out for me is there is a paragraph that explains how you can meet people online for sexual activity, but that probably won't lead to a long-term relationship.
that's it. Not the danger of being kidnapped,
No, it wasn't
mutilated,
really-
and disappeared.
It made some flippant, you got to be careful kind of nonsense. But we're talking about 11 to 13-year-olds. And to me, if you are encouraging a child not your own to engage in sexual activity
Or even connection
seems
on
to
the
me
internet. That's,
that is fire in a theater,
yeah.
right?
It seems dangerous.
The whole idea is you can't cause public harm.
Well, that could
And you
definitely
could say,
cause.
well, my idea is I have freedom of speech. Well, you do have freedom of speech, but you don't have the right to walk into a school, into a fourth grade classroom and begin talking about anal sex. Well, that's in the book.
Well, I don't know. I listened
Now,
to a speaker talk about
here's my
drugs
thing.
and alcohol.
That book has no place in a school library, but that book
Oh, it can
can
absolutely
be in a public
published.
library
Yeah.
if the board of the library, duly elected by the local community, votes to allow it to be there.
But the local communities are saying no, and that's the whole point here.
That's how government works.
Yes,
if they vote and replace the person on the library board,
and get somebody in who they
well, that works for all things. It's not just a
exactly.
library board. It's city
Exactly.
councils and parish police
school
juries.
boards and
And if you don't like that, then you don't like democratic government.
you don't.
And if you don't like democratic government, well, you a communist. Get out.
you don't like to kill a mockingbird.
But
But see, okay, and there's my issue as an English teacher. We want to get rid of To Kill a Mockingbird, Fahrenheit, Anne Frank. We want to get rid of classics that are on no controversial level compared to This Book Is Gay.
well, I have an example.
All right, please.
Fahrenheit 451, a book about censorship. Funny enough, it is and for those of you who've not read Fahrenheit 451, first of all, I chastise you.
Yes.
Second of all, read it.
Bad American.
And it's a novel about a world where books are banned as a method of social control, and firemen are the ones who burn them. He's an agent of the state tasked with destroying literature because it might cause people to think for themselves. But he is awakened somehow. Well, I know how. He gets a book and reads it.
And ideas come to life in
Now,
his
here's the
mind.
fun part in the book. It gets really crazy. And this will sound, if I had told somebody this premise years ago, they would have went, well, that'll never happen. But allow me. Give me a moment.
Do tell.
It's a story about the power of modern media to both stupefy and incense the collective consciousness. It culminates in a crowdsourced manhunt television, crowdsourced manhunt televised for the amusement of self-satisfied dullards, all to serve the agenda of the authoritarian state. That doesn't sound familiar, does it? While the novel predates social media by decades, it describes what might be understood as media-driven cancel mobs. Bradbury understood how censorship could slide from the seemingly innocuous attempts to ban a few dangerous ideas to prohibiting entire zones of thought, opinion, and inquiry, and eventually to direct attacks on individuals who hold ideas that others don't agree with. Huh.
Wow.
That's weird.
Very prophetic.
Well, it gets better. Schools you were talking about.
Yes.
Well, they used to have the book in schools, and they were in its original form. And then, starting in 1967, publisher Ballantine Books produced a new version of Fahrenheit 451.
So I assume the one I've taught then has been the updated modern.
No, it's probably the correct one now.
Okay.
But this version became known as the Balhai edition for high school. And for many years, it was available concurrently with the original text. You could order whichever one you wanted. But in 1973, Ballantine began publishing only the Balhai version for schools, took the original out.
Completely.
And it continued doing so until Bradbury, who heard about it for the first time in 1979, raised a ruckus. No. And now the original version of the book is back in schools. And you'd say, yay.
Well, because there was nothing wrong with it. It wasn't like there was.
But 10 years ago in Conroe, Texas, several parents protested the book's inclusion in the curriculum because it has language and it denigrates firefighters.
Oh, so if they read it, they didn't understand it.
And this is my favorite. Hang on.
So sad.
Quote, "It's just all kinds of filth," said parent Alton Verm. "I want to get that book taken out of class."
Why do you assume he sounds like that?
Because his name is Alton Verm and he wants to ban a book I'm sure he's never read.
You, sir, are stereotyping.
Luckily, one of the people on the school board said, "Mr. Verm, have you read the novel?"
I know, right?
And he admitted he had not.
So he's getting all fired up, getting himself riled up, could have a heart attack.
That Romeo and Juliet's pedophilia. That's Shakespeare. He's a groomer.
Oh, dear.
I heard about it on QAnon.
Oh, well, see, there's the danger of ideas.
Yeah.
There is the danger of ideas.
The danger in our society today is that there are people too stupid to realize that QAnon is nonsense. Lizard people. Come on.
Well,
this cabal of famous people around the world
can I start
collecting children?
Scientology. Can we just go down the list? I mean,
we can.
It happens all the time. We are faulty and weak beings.
Freedom of speech requires that the onus is on the listener.
Exactly. The hearer. The hearer has to have enough sense,
enough intelligence.
Well, and see, to me, ideas and thoughts help limit ignorance.
And also social grace, because you have that right. You have the right to go, huh?
Interesting.
Well, you think people are actually lizards? That's
and the
odd.
Earth is flat, and okay.
Have a good day.
Yeah, good day to you too, and go on,
and then move on with your life.
That is always my problem. That's where you find your balance. Because how are you enraged all the time? How are you indignant about things and angry and upset and
sticks and stones might break my bones, but words will hurt me so bad.
Well, that's okay. Then you just gave me the segue right back into the college
You're welcome.
people. Okay, so we know each other so well.
I didn't know.
So well, you didn't know?
No.
Okay, well, so that was the idea then that colleges, because the guy that wrote the bell curve at the University of, or not at the University of Michigan, is that where they were all
the bell curve's racist?
Well, and that of course was the idea, right? That it was a racist text.
Is the text racist then?
Well, it links socioeconomic status with race and intelligence, and I thought to myself, well,
but
that's
don't
just
people.
It's a cycle.
Well, wait,
so
don't people link socioeconomic status and race all the time?
Yes, they do. But he added intelligence to the list, so I guess that just did it all. But I don't know if Middlebury.
But he based it on IQ test, right?
I don't know if Middlebury College in Vermont is a private university or a public university. I'm thinking private, but I don't know. Anyway,
who cares?
The students,
Yankees.
when he spoke, those students, pushed and shoved. His own a faculty interviewer suffered a concussion at the event because people got so upset. Liberal students refusing to hear speech they disagree with. Right. That's
right.
This is the rush of.
This is the modern
problem.
Liberal, of course.
Yes. So. Like the professor said, if you can hate his views, but so what? You need to deal with it, counter it, or ignore it. Just move on. That's a good academic experience. You've heard something you now disagree with. Maybe go research it and find the full issue. And you've limited your ignorance at that point. I want to know that the ideas are out there. What if a group like QAnon was out there silent, and they were silently building for years?
Well, that's the problem. Because QAnon's out there there are still people who are silently.
Exactly. Those are the ones you should be scared of. I'm sorry. I've grown up feeling like that is the real issue. It's the ones you don't hear about. When I watched David Duke on Phil Donahue and I talked to my father about it, he said, we need to know these people are out there.
Absolutely.
Phil Donahue, yes. Yes.
I will say right now, if the German people as a whole had actually known the true plans of Adolf Hitler, and his circle of
But he wrote it in a book.
He did, but here's the problem. Most people bought the book. I guarantee you most people didn't read the book. Because if you actually look at the book,
then
it's
that's
nearly unreadable. No, it's unreadable.
Oh, okay. No,
they listened to what he said on the radio.
Yeah.
And he didn't espouse most of those ideas in public.
Publicly, yeah.
He wrote them down.
And there's my point.
And he never in the book says, I intend to kill every Jew I can get my hands on.
But, isn't that one of the wisdoms of life, that you watch what they do, not what they say?
Correct. But they did a lot. There's a reason it's called Night and Fog. It's because most of this stuff, when it started, most people were unaware it was happening.
Yes.
And then gradually it got so big that people finally just resigned themselves
So had we had
out of fear.
Social media at the time, it would have...
It'd have been different.
I think
they've often said that if television had existed, Hitler might not have been able to come to power because he looks so insane when he's giving speeches.
Yeah.
They've already argued that if the debate between Nixon and Kennedy had been on the radio that Nixon would have beaten Kennedy.
Yeah, Kennedy was on it for the
but
looks.
Nixon was sick and he looked terrible.
He never looked great, but yeah.
Well, he didn't understand.
Especially
he didn't understand television.
No, very few did at the time. And so truth to the idea that Hitler based his speech giving form to Huey P. Long.
Yes, absolutely. UP watched and vice versa.
See how I brought the boot back to it?
Or actually, it was UP Long. No, Hitler watched UP Long.
Yes,
I believe. Yes.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because
there you go.
The boot.
But yeah, freedom of speech is one of these things that we have to kind of play with. But in the end, you can't just shut down people you don't agree with.
No, you can. If you can justify censoring other people, then those are the weapons that are going to be used against you.
And by the way, there is a new group. I'd like to go ahead and just talk about them real quick, called FIRE.
Why do I feel like, is this real?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
ACLU used to be the big protector of civil rights and freedom of speech, but the ACLU has turned decidedly political to the liberal side.
All right.
The newest group protecting individual rights and expression is called the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE, and they particularly focus on freedom of speech.
All right.
Especially on college campuses. That's where they are really working. And it's really interesting that the newest survey that this came out this month, 40% of all college students feel uncomfortable sharing a controversial opinion in a classroom for fear that they will be shouted down.
Exactly. Paresia, that freedom of speech idea of paresia, and that your classmates, that society is going to stop you. Self-censorship is big.
Yeah. And it's fear.
Yes.
Again, this goes right back to fear.
Yep.
And I think that's a real problem. If we don't have freedom of expression on college campuses, we're going to run into a real problem.
Well, because
down
those are the voters of the future, and that was the college's complaints, is that they come out of high school not understanding their rights, not understanding the First Amendment, and living in, what's the term they use? They called it a virtual reality silo. That young people come to college now and they've not had any contact with anything outside of their views because of the way the media, the way the internet continually builds what you see based on your preferences.
Right.
So you just get confirmation bias constantly, and that makes you feel good because everybody thinks like me.
Well, and here's why. 64% of students are worried that a simple misunderstanding of something they say or do could damage their reputation permanently.
Yes, and then they lose a career.
48% said they would be very uncomfortable expressing a view on a controversial topic to students they didn't know in a public space or classroom on campus.
Well, because you can't qualify your opinions enough anymore to please everybody.
And here's the best part. rates of discomfort are comparable across racial categories.
Yes.
32% of blacks, 39% of whites, 37% of Hispanics, 33% of Asians, 40% of Asians and American Indians, the highest, report discomfort when speaking out on a controversial topic.
Yeah, so instead they sit in the classroom.
But think if you're the professor trying to stir up this discussion.
As an English teacher, that's part of what you have to have conversation about these difficult topics. That actually kind of links to that story I saved. It's called College Students Are Quiet Quitting to Preserve Their Mental Health.
Yeah.
So the world really just has too much.
So they're just not even going to talk.
They're not going to talk. They're not going to do anything more than they need to do. The motto really is C's get degrees.
Yeah.
So we're not going to do more than we need to do. My college story, 37%, here's the number. 90% said it is never acceptable to use violence to prevent someone from speaking, but 10% said it is acceptable sometime. And I thought that the 90%, some of them are lying, because the very next one was 37% of college students also said shouting down speakers is acceptable sometimes. So I think that the 90% just said what they thought they were supposed to say. 53% of students said they saw promoting an inclusive society that welcomes diverse groups as more important than protecting free speech.
You can't have diverse groups if you don't protect free speech.
2/3 of students said they did not believe the Constitution should protect hate speech.
What's hate speech?
Well, the very next comment is about a white nationalist who was doing a college talks, at the University of Florida, where they have different student groups. He said different student groups in the University of Florida lived in different realities. Some of them experienced visceral fear. It was not a matter of whether or not he should have the right to speak. They were viscerally afraid of him because of his organization and his policies. So he said it's really difficult to balance the idea of free speech against their fear, because colleges
because his words might damage them.
Yes, and colleges want to appease these students, and they
not all colleges.
So, the
it's
ones
getting
here,
better.
yeah,
I got something.
They have programs trying to help kids to be able to deal with it. I guess they all get a stuffed teddy bear. I don't know.
FIRE found that on college campuses, and this won't surprise probably most people, 27% of students identifying as strong Democrats report being very uncomfortable to share their opinions. 45% of strong Republicans fear sharing their opinion.
More, yeah.
So there's a perceived bias on college campuses towards the left versus the right, which probably is true. But by and large, colleges have always been more liberal than society in general.
Because that's the idea, is that you experience a bunch of different ideas, different thoughts, different people from around the world, not just your local area. You should be expanding, and that's their program. They're sending kids to other places.
Most college students haven't yet had to live in the world, the real world.
Yeah.
And it's easy to be liberal, really liberal, when you aren't having to earn a paycheck.
Yeah.
Now, once you're out there working, you still hold all the same views you had in college. Good on you.
Good on you. Exactly. You've managed to skirt a lot of stuff.
But most people discover, once they leave the comfy world of college, that conservative viewpoints on economics make a lot of sense to your pocketbook.
Well, sure.
So you don't have to be. I'm just pointing out the difference that.
Well, that's what eventually happens, isn't that? Of course. It's part of the cycle of life.
It's easy to be liberal when you're not responsible for many of the things that you consider
your livelihood.
Well, that we consider to make a home. You want to make money. And again, this goes back to, look, if you have a degree in some type of, let's say, literature, just British lit, that's your degree. Let's say you get master's.
Well, then you're going to teach in a college.
Then you're going to be in a college.
Or you're going to be a high school English teacher.
Because that degree is virtually worthless
it's not
anywhere
going to get
else.
you a whole lot. Well,
and that's fine.
You think, what are you going to be in, a think tank?
Yeah. Well, you write papers, you do studies, you do
research.
Research, sure.
Okay.
And so
you're going to live off the government tit.
Not necessarily. There are grants. Lots of grants. That's right.
We're back to that.
But the point is, the really sad thing, well, I guess it's not sad really, but
Okay, so
it's
you you better qualify that statement.
30% of students find that it is acceptable to shout down a
Yes.
speaker to prevent them from speaking on campus, and only a very small percentage say violence is acceptable. I can't believe that any.
Well, I think that some of them are lying.
80% say it should never be acceptable to harm anyone physically.
80%.
80%.
Well, isn't that your risk when
Then
you
that
go,
means 20% think, yeah.
well, isn't that your risk when you go out about your life outside the world?
Well, that's both sides do
You
it.
just
Both
got-
sides play
so-
this game.
2 out of every 10 people are likely to rob your ass.
But the whole point of all of this from FIRE, the group, is that you have 2 problems, not 1, but 2, just like you started with the 2 versions of freedom of speech. First, most college campuses now have strict speech codes.
Yes.
So we've imposed censorship on a
Well,
college
that's
campus.
what the government was trying to do to social media businesses. So
And many
then-
schools are prone to caving in to the pressure to censor
yes.
people and students and faculty who make controversial
But
statements.
I think that's still the minority.
so we,
I don't think they're the majority.
but that policy, those policies at these colleges constitute a clear and present danger
Yes, they do.
to the rights of thousands of students.
Yes. The ones who won't speak up because
Right
they're
back
scared.
to yelling fire in a crowded movie house. The whole point of that is you can't do that because it's a clear and present danger to the rights, the life of people in the theater. If you start doing this on college campuses, that is a clear and present danger to the speech rights of thousands of American college students who you don't agree with.
And you know what? I would even go so far as to argue that that's also a physical health threat to because you're holding back. You're constantly you're afraid. It's like you're in fight or flight all the time, and it's stressful.
And we're going to push the ones who think violence is okay. They're not going to say anything.
No, they're not until
And that's the problem with curtailing their
That's-
speech.
that's all the way
is
back.
Because if they're not telling us how they feel
Yeah.
and they act out,
then we
that
weren't
causes
prepared.
actual harm.
Yes, we weren't prepared.
That's right.
Well, you saw the is it the Parkland shooter?
The one most recently.
Yeah.
Not, Parkland shooter was insane. He had mental problems.
Well, that's the point. He's going to not get the death penalty.
Right.
They're going to because they
He's mentally ill.
acknowledge that the system let him down
Well, his system, his mother, his stepmother.
all along the way.
All the way.
And nobody. So here, do you want the government stepping in and helping this family?
But this doesn't
in
have anything to do with
crisis?
speech. How about
No,
the guy who
it-
just shot up, what was it? The most recent, the QAnon guy that just had they just had a shooting
I
not
don't
too
know.
long ago.
I try to limit my social.
I know, but the point is, he was a quiet one.
Yeah.
Gee, we didn't know.
Yeah,
and then
we
they start
didn't know.
digging and they start finding little
But
things.
it's always on social media. They almost always speak out, and nobody.
But the Texas law would prevent the Texas. Okay, so he wasn't on Facebook. He'd already had his Facebook account closed.
Yeah,
The Texas law would tell Facebook you can't close his account,
yeah.
which may have been helpful.
Yeah, more people. Well, but see, that's the thing. We all watch. Everybody sits back and watches, and we all go, "Oh yeah, I knew he was going to go
He's
off.
nuts.
He's crazy. He's crazy." But then, so we'll come together as a group to shout somebody down because we don't like their ideas, but we won't come together as a group to save some poor teenager who's about to
Go off.
lose his mind and go and shoot up a school.
Yeah.
We can't do that, but we can do the other. This is my theory. It's easier to scream and yell at somebody and say, I hate you, than it is to say, I love you. And
Sure.
why is that about humanity?
Oh, because we suck.
Did you want one last really stupid thing? Or do you have something else?
I don't want to talk about Joe Biden.
No.
Oh, but
Do you mukbang?
mukbang?
Do you mukbang?
Well, tell me what it is, and I'll tell you if I do it.
Well, it's just the indulgence of being an American, I guess.
I don't bang
I
muck.
don't know. Well, mukbanging, and it's vegans in particular right
Is this
now.
is this like muckraking?
Well, I'll tell you what it is, and you tell me if it's like muckraking, okay?
Okay.
Couples sit together for breakfast, their plates piled high with vegan sausages, broccoli, and rice.
I hate them
what
already.
they
Go
consider
ahead.
a typically vegan meal. Like any couple, they talk about the day they have ahead. What's strange in the scenario is that anyone online can watch them eat. all this food. They're sharing this moment with themselves and with the world.
I'd shut this down.
Huge, excessive amounts of food, social eating. It's an online movement known as mukbang, in which people worldwide share videos of themselves eating large amounts of food on camera and talking about their food and their day.
Okay. You know what? They have a right to do it.
They have a right to do it, but who the hell has the time to sit around watching somebody else live a life?
Yeah. And do you really want to hear
Yes, people do. That's that other thing. I don't know what the hell it's called, but people pay people money.
ASMR?
Yes. To sit.
Yeah, but ASMR.
I can talk there very softly. I did yoga. I know how to do that.
I'm polishing my head right now. I'm using a wax that allows my head to become very shiny.
Anyway.
I shaved just moments before this podcast so that my head would squeak just a little. You can hear it if you listen. See? Yeah.
The trend started in 2014, but has spread worldwide.
Boo.
Mukbang.
Boo.
So, folks, if you're out of work, you need a job, consider mukbanging. You know what? I think somebody out of work should start a mukbang site, and instead of being a vegan site, they should be eating all the things that people out of work eat. You know, ramen noodles and Spam from a can and Vienna sausages, and you just eat that crap on camera. And maybe people will give you money, and then you will no longer be unemployed. You will be gainfully contributing to society.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was my stupid story of the week because you didn't want me to talk about dildos.
Hey, you don't have a right to talk about that on this podcast, lady.
Do you know me? I have a right to talk about any damn thing I want to.
In America, I'm going to say, to wrap it up today.
Yeah, let's do it.
Her Majesty the Queen died.
Yeah.
And while it was sad, I think we can at least all agree that we kind of expected it.
It was
for the
a life
last,
well lived.
I don't know, 20 years.
She had great
Anyway,
healthcare.
She had corgis, so she was cool with me.
She was. I liked her dogs.
But she died in England. They don't have the right to freedom of speech.
No, they do not.
And people who are holding up signs that are negative in any way towards the monarchy are being arrested.
They were removed.
Yes, they are being arrested.
There was somebody in the audience screaming, "That's their free speech." I'm like, "You American, go home."
A linguistics professor who is from Nigeria, who now is a professor at the Carnegie Mellon University, and she's a linguistics professor. She identified the Queen in a tweet as the chief monarch of thieving, raping, genocidal empire and wished her death to be excruciating.
Oh, wow. All right.
The university said, well, her comments were offensive and objectionable. What was, if anything, pretty mean. In a culture where we are reluctant to speak ill of the dead, wishing an old woman a painful demise is kind of harsh and nasty, no matter the misdeeds of the British Empire that came before her. Some people want her fired. I would say that she shouldn't be.
No, leave her alone.
She was expressing her views on her Twitter.
Based on her life.
So, yeah, I'm exactly there.
That's it.
I don't have to like what she said. In fact, I think it was mean and cruel and stupid.
It was poorly timed.
And I hope that, she suffers excruciating pain when she dies. There. Now we've evened it up.
And see, I'm more about the balance note. Everybody.
A 45-year-old man was arrested on the parade route as Charles went by for yelling out, "Who elected him then?"
That was it?
That was it. He got arrested.
DNA elected him. Poor guy.
But I'm going to... George Orwell, another Brit, who recognized the problems with this whole speech thing.
The slippery slope we were on as a humanity.
Said, when it gets down to it,
yes,
if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people the things they do not want to hear.
Inconvenient.
Yes.
Yes. You have
the right to do that. If you don't want to hear it, you don't have the right not to hear it. You can walk away. Mm-hmm. And if you don't like it on TV, turn the channel. If you don't like it on the radio, if you don't like it in the newspaper, you
don't read it.
Are in control.
Yes.
Everyone should be their own censor when it comes to the information they take in.
Make your own judgment.
And if anything, I think we can all rest comfortably in the knowledge that today's teenagers are watching TikTok videos of people just dancing and nothing serious. They avoid controversy like the plague. You can't even get them to talk anymore.
But then they go to college and they lose their shit.
Yes.
Is
It's
that
a beautiful thing.
Is that the cycle that's happening?
It's so weird. As a teacher, observing this change because of social media and especially TikTok, where everything is in 15-second bites.
Yeah.
It's wild.
It's really a shift.
And if you're about to go into teaching, let me tell you, you nuts? What are you thinking?
Yeah, it's going to have to be something different.
Well, it needs to be some type of robotic thing.
It's going to be different.
A thing that you cannot stop.
We'll save
that
this.
will continue and continue.
Like our love bugs.
Like love bugs.
All right, everybody go out and clean your windshields. Your Joy is portable. Bring it with you, just like your love bug smeared windshield.
And we love y'all, and we'll see you. Well, see you. We'll be back with another Long in the Boot podcast in about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
It's 14 days to you and me.
Bye.
This is the Long in the Boot podcast, the podcast coming to you from the heel of the boot of Southwest Louisiana. I am your host, G Long, and sitting across the way is Deb.
Hello, all.
And
that's how you start?
I will take the cough out in post-production, so you just ruined it. You just ruined it. Way to go.
Okay, introduce me again.
Greetings, folks. This is... I can't. I have a thing. Okay.
You want some cider?
No. All right, here we go. One more time. Greetings. No, but see, now the music. I always talk over the last part of the music, and it just doesn't
then
seem to
start the
work.
whole fucker again.